So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sheryl Sandberg from both Google.com and Google.org, and it's my pleasure to have two welcomes this afternoon. The first is to welcome you as part of your continuing welcome to Google to participate in what we call the Google Grants Program. Larry, Sergey, Larry Brilliant, and I wanted to extend an opportunity to get free advertising on Google to all of the nonprofits that are here with us today. The Google Grants Program, we've extended it to about 2,000 nonprofits worldwide. We've given away about $140 million in free advertising. And most importantly, we've worked with our grantees to help them use the power of the web to broaden their reach. Jane will be helping us send an email to all of you, giving you the details of how to sign up. As you can imagine, there's a fairly long wait list for this program, but we'll expedite the process for the organizations that are here today. And we hope it helps you grow your reach and grow your impact. The second welcome I'm pleased to be able to do today is to welcome you to the next part of our agenda, financing poverty alleviation. All of us are here because we care about the world's poor, and we know that there's no easy answer to improve the lives of the 2 billion people living on less than $2 a day. We know it'll take a combination of things to make a real difference. It'll take the right government rules, the right government laws, the right momentum for the private sector. It will also take aid, both in the form of private philanthropy and in the form of government aid. And one of the challenges we all face is that in neither of these two areas are we doing what we could or should be doing. Google.org just commissioned and completed a study of private philanthropic giving in the United States. We published the findings last week in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and we'll be publishing the full study on our website in about 4 to 6 weeks. And despite the fact that Americans, as private citizens, are the most generous in the world, giving over $250 billion annually, which is a large number compared to any other kind of giving, unfortunately, only 8% of that goes to international causes of any kind. And if you poll Americans, they will tell you that their primary reason for their private donations is to help people that are not as well off as themselves, but only 1/3 of their donation touches anyone in need anywhere in the world. If we are going to make a difference, Americans need to follow the example of people like Steve and Jean Case, and not just identify as part of their local communities, giving to their local institutions, their churches, their universities, institutions that provide important public goods but don't help alleviate global poverty. We need to help Americans define themselves not just as Americans, but as citizens of the world, building a broader global community. Government aid faces the same problem. If you poll Americans, they will tell you that 15 to 30% of the U.S. federal budget goes to help nations, other nations in need. The reality is a very small percentage, less than 20 times that. In fact, the total developed world gave a paltry 0.3% of global national income to development. Now, those numbers are still big, and so one of the things we're focused on is raising that number and also making it as effective as possible. And that's where our next speaker comes in. I'm very pleased to introduce Ambassador John Danilovich to the stage. He became CEO of the Millennium Challenge Corporation in November 2005 after a very distinguished career. He served as ambassador to Brazil and ambassador to Costa Rica from the years 2001 to 2005. Before that, a very successful career in the international shipping business. He served on the boards of directors of the Panama Canal Commission, a director of the Stanford University Trust, and a director of the US-UK Fulbright Commission, among many other activities. But most importantly, he's one of the leaders in the world at trying to make government aid effective by giving recipients the right incentives to do the right things to help their own populations. Ambassador, we're pleased to have you here.
Thank you very much, Sheryl, for that very generous introduction. I greatly appreciate it. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak to such a distinguished audience of philanthropists, entrepreneurs, public, private, and corporate executives, and representatives of various foundations, and to tell you about the work that the Millennium Challenge Corporation is doing to combat poverty throughout the world. Reflecting the President's vision and Congress's bipartisan support, a unique combination at the best of times, and recognizing the responsibilities we have as part of the developed world to assist those in the developing world The Millennium Challenge Corporation was established by an act of Congress in 2004 to offer an alternative to U.S. foreign development assistance. The MCC model is based on the American ideals of compassion for those in need, together with accountability and responsibility, and it provides sizable development assistance grants to partner countries that practice sound policies supporting good governance, investments in health and education of their citizens, and economic freedom, countries that are actively engaging and pursuing their own development by devising and implementing their homegrown strategies for poverty reduction through economic growth, and countries that demand nothing less than measurable and tangible results in the lives of the poor. To date, the MCC has awarded development grants, what we call compacts, to 11 partner countries throughout the world, totaling $3 billion. Another $310 million has been awarded to 13 other countries in threshold agreements to help them address policy weaknesses to push them over the threshold towards compact eligibility. Though we are committed to development assistance alone is not the answer to alleviating poverty. The answer is using aid as a foundation, a starting point, a springboard to attract and leverage what is essential for generating sustainable and transformative poverty alleviation. MCC's approach does just that. We use our aid to leverage the power of good policies, a country's ownership of its own development, and the role of private enterprise to fight poverty. Let me explain what I mean by each of these areas. First, aid alone is ineffective if a country's policy environment underutilizes or wastes it. For this reason, the MCC is designed to provide aid as a positive reward to countries that have a sound policy framework already in place. We do not provide aid to a country that promises to enact good policies. We provide aid to countries because they already practice good policies. Lessons learned after decades of work in the development arena prove that performance-based aid allocation helps maximize aid effectiveness. Therefore, we partner with countries that measure above the median on at least half of the 16 objective and transparent indicators we use to assess a government's performance in the areas of ruling justly, investing in the health and education of their people, and promoting economic freedom. We also require our partner countries to perform above the median on our control of corruption indicator. Currently, the Millennium Challenge Corporation is the only donor that ties eligibility for assistance to performance on a transparent and public control of corruption benchmark. We create scorecards summarizing a country's indicator performance for our board to use in making its selection of countries that qualify for our aid. You can visit our website at www.mcc.gov to view the indicator scorecards for all low-income and lower-middle-income countries. Because scores and data drive our approach, countries suffering from corruption, poor governance, and closed markets do not receive our assistance. Countries that do not perform well on our indicators are encouraged to improve and try again in the next selection round. And many countries are doing just that. And even after a country is selected to participate in our program, it must continue to maintain passing scores on their performance indicators or risk losing their eligibility. Since we maintain that aid goes further and will be awarded only by us if good policies are in place, we are finding that countries are taking it upon themselves to proactively initiate and accelerate policy reforms. We call this phenomenon the Mcc Effect. The Dominican Republic, for example, launched a campaign to immunize 5 million of its citizens for measles and explicitly attributed the tremendous undertaking to its desire to qualify for MCC assistance, since the MCC measures immunization rates in our Investing in People category. Countries talk to us and even hire experts to help them better assess their indicator performance. They engage directly with the organizations supplying the indicator data to make sure the policy performance is captured accurately. Countries are providing us with detailed reform agendas. It is no accident that some of the most aggressive policy reformers in the world, as measured by the World Bank's Doing Business report, are MCC eligible. According to that report, 24 countries specifically cited the MCC as the primary motivation for their efforts to improve their business climate. Presidents, ministers, and government officials regularly call on us or ask our ambassadors in the field, What reforms do we need to make to become eligible for MCC funding? To date, at least 14 countries have established interministerial committees and presidential commissions to devise, implement, and track reform strategies that address our selection criteria. They share our core belief that aid is most effective in a policy environment where good governance, as well as economic and human development, are valued. Second, aid alone is ineffective if it fails to enable countries to help themselves. We believe our partner countries must play the central role in their own development. Our aid and our involvement must enable countries to build their own capacity to do for themselves. Therefore, we ask our partner countries to develop their proposals for funding after identifying their barriers to poverty reduction and economic growth in consultation with their civil societies, including the private sector. Taking an approach much like an investor rather than a traditional donor, we require that countries themselves come up with their development strategy and provide their proposals to the MCC, much like a business plan. If due diligence determines that their proposals are well integrated and comprehensive, we not only provide the funding up front, but also ask countries to implement these proposals. And we ask that they work with us to monitor their performance and evaluate impact along the way. These expectations have stretched the capabilities in our partner countries and motivated them to develop new capabilities, and also to think critically about what policies are needed or what institutions need to be strengthened or created to sustain development. They are building country capacity. In Ghana, for example, one of the major obstacles to the successful implementation of development projects has been the lack of adequately trained public procurement specialists. The ability to procure goods and services in a transparent and competitive manner ensures the best use of public funds. MCC is funding a procurement capacity building initiative within the Ghanaian government designed to strengthen the effectiveness of various procurement entities. By improving the efficiency of government procurement, substantial resources can be saved in future years, resources that could be directed towards health and education for the poor. Fair and competitive procurement also strengthens business confidence and encourages an open environment for innovation. Countries previously have not been expected to take on such an ownership role in their own development or to take on the level of responsibility and accountability that the MCC demands. Yet we believe that country ownership is an absolute prerequisite if we are serious about leveraging our aid to make it more effective in the fight against poverty. Third, aid alone is ineffective if countries are not prepared to continue without it. Through good policies and country ownership, we foresee the day when our aid can be replaced by the self-sustaining economic activity driven and spurred from within a partner country itself by the private sector. We believe that the private sector fuels economic growth, and that countries experiencing such growth will see the number of their citizens living in poverty decrease. We see MCC's role as transitional as we become the gateway to private sector engagement. Even the most generous American investment can only be sustained unless favorable conditions exist for private sector enterprise to flourish and to become the engine for driving long-term economic growth. Because the MCC demands performance on indicators evaluating fiscal, monetary, regulatory, and trade conditions, including the costs and days to start a business, and insists on transparency and a rejection of corruption, we create a powerful incentive for countries to foster a business climate where the private sector can flourish and can do business. This stimulates homegrown entrepreneurship, small business development, increased trade and investor opportunities, both domestically and for international companies. In our compact with Benin, for example, the access to financial services component is dedicated to improving the capacity of small rural enterprises to respond to new business opportunities by reducing the cost of credit and facilitating access to financial services. Within 5 years, we expect that this will generate substantial new investment, creating jobs, raising incomes, and lifting the lives of the poor out of poverty in Benin. By creating favorable business conditions through our compact with Nicaragua, MCC has already helped attract almost $10 million of investment from outside firms, particularly Grupo Beta, a textile manufacturing firm that will generate 1,500 local jobs. And we hope that this is only the tip of the iceberg. Like Grupo Beta, we want others in the private sector to look closely at what is happening in our MCC partner countries. Because MCC investments create and require viable physical, financial, and policy infrastructure, the private sector has a favorable point of entry to initiate or expand their own commercial activities. I encourage and invite the business community to leverage MCC investments and use them as a springboard, complementing or as alternatives for their own investments. MCC eligibility and selection have been viewed by business and investors as providing countries with a good government imprimatur, a good housekeeping seal of approval, and have encouraged and attracted investments in MCC countries. I also invite foundations and companies with compassionate corporate social responsibility initiatives to look carefully at MCC programs in countries in which they have an interest. In conversations we have had with the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, for example, we have identified a number of mutual synergies in our fight against poverty, which are very worth exploring further. I have no doubt that we can be more effective, all of us, in achieving our objectives if we work together rather than when we work alone. Aid alone is not the answer to financing poverty alleviation. Aid that encourages and rewards good policies, expects countries to be champions of their own development, and engages the private sector by creating the right conditions is the answer. And this is the approach the MCC is taking to reduce poverty among our partner countries. Initial results demonstrate that our approach is working. Our compacts are lifting communities out of poverty by stimulating economic growth through infrastructure projects that makes access to markets, schools, and health clinics possible, projects to improve the security of land tenure for small farmers, soil conservation programs and improvements to agriculture and irrigation systems, business development initiatives, including micro-lending credit programs, improvements to water and sanitation services that are so vital to health. Land titles are being awarded in Nicaragua and Madagascar, many to women. MCC expects that women alongside men participate fully in creating, implementing, and reaping the benefits of our compacts in keeping with our gender policy, which Women's Ed's Coalition and its president, Ritu Sharma Fox, who I see here today, played such a significant part in developing. Farmers in Honduras are transitioning from corn and beans to higher profit crops, such as squash and jalapenos. Farming cooperatives in Madagascar are growing geranium plants that will produce oil and soaps for perfumes. That will produce oil for soaps and perfumes. Grants have been awarded for the first 8 agribusiness development projects in Georgia that are creating new jobs, improving technologies, and facilitating market access. In Burkina Faso, girl-friendly schools are enrolling some 13,000 students, more than double the number from the last academic year, with girls making up more than half of the student population. The Millennium Challenge Corporation embodies government's effective role in applying new parameters and higher expectations to grant funding for development assistance to finance tangible outcomes that transform the lives of the poor. MCC seeks to fully leverage our relationships with our partner countries, committed to sound policies, and to engaging the private sector in order to reduce poverty through economic growth in sustainable and transformative ways. This is the solution that the Millennium Challenge Corporation offers, a solution that is already making progress and showing signs of success in replacing poverty with prosperity for the world's poorest. Again, I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today, and I look forward to your continued interest and support of the Millennium Challenge Corporation and to answering any questions which you may have. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Thanks. I'm Bob Berg, World Academy of Art and Science.
Yes, Bob.
The G8 will apparently call for implementation of earlier pledges to increase greatly assistance to Africa. The administration has increased aid, but not to the level that the G8 is calling for. How do you see that playing out, both with the U.S. government and the G8 partners?
The G8 conference that Bob's referring to will take place in Germany next month, and it is anticipated that there will be a further African initiative at that time. I'm not part of that process. The Millennium Challenge Corporation is outside of the G8 mechanism and outside of the decision-making process that takes place with the administration with regards to that effort, with regards to Africa. Half of our $3 billion that we have committed goes to African countries. And it's anticipated that this year we'll have a number of other countries which come through our pipeline with large compacts around the $500 to $600 million area, the majority of which will be African. Our countries at the moment are in Africa comprised of Mali, Ghana, Benin, Madagascar, and probably this year, depending upon how our negotiations go with these countries, Morocco, Mozambique, Lesotho, Namibia. So through the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the U.S. government and the administration has already a significant commitment to Africa in that regard. Yes.
Hi, I'm Catherine Kreis with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, former Foreign Service officer myself. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how this program differs from aid that comes through USAID and through the Centers for Disease Control and other organizations that are working in international development.
Sure. The Millennium Challenge Corporation, as I mentioned, was established 3 years ago by an act of Congress to be an independent U.S. government corporation, a U.S. independent government agency. We are not part of USAID. We're not part of the State Department or the Department of Defense or the Department of Commerce, for that matter. We are funded directly by Congress for our own specific programs to fulfill their mandate, which is to reduce poverty through economic growth. We do work closely, however, with all other government agencies on a regular basis, specifically with USAID. In fact, the threshold program that I mentioned, which is our preliminary program in the hopes that countries can address indicator weakness and eventually graduate to become a full compact country, those threshold programs are, in fact, carried out by USAID in country. We pay them to do that, and it relieves us of the responsibility of having to set up an operation, which would be quite costly for us. So we have a cooperation with USAID in that administrative sense for our threshold programs. Additionally, with USAID or with the World Bank or with other donor countries, Norwegians, Dutch, etc., there are a number of areas where we are working on not the same project, but projects which carry on one from the other, whether it be a road, which the World Bank may be doing part of and we're doing another part, or some European involvement as well with regards to a number of our projects throughout the world. We have had significant approaches from Europeans, countries specifically, the British in particular, the French, with regards to our activities, our foreign aid with accountability model, as well as the European Union. And it's a model which is gaining increased credibility in terms of not only what it stands for in terms of good government, but also in terms of countries wanting to use that model to a certain extent, and also to cooperate with us in a longer-based relationship of cooperation. Yes.
Thanks. I have a question, and I apologize because I know this is slightly off your project. But one of the things I just recently found out about was that if Africa could increase their trade by 1%, it would actually cover all the aid that they currently are getting. And so and when I think about what you're trying to do is develop jobs, do you foresee having any impact
Absolutely.
On that, as well as I also understand that President Bush wants to make it so that some of the USAID money is not spent in our country, but is spent in actually the countries that are having emergencies, so that then the money is used more than once within that country.
You're not far off from the subject that we do. In fact, with regards to aid for trade, we're big believers in stimulating the national economies, particularly in the countries that we're involved in, through their agricultural programs. A number come to mind. Almost all of our compacts have agricultural components where we are seeking, for example, as I mentioned, higher value crops in some areas. I was just in Ghana, where there is a significant pineapple plantation, which we're trying to encourage the development of, along with nuclear farms, as well as port facilities in Western Africa in general. So aid for trade is very much a significant component of our compacts. We look at that as a part of the long-term sustainability, which ties into, of course, having the government administrative structures in place so that our aid can be sustained on a protracted basis. With regards to the second part of the question, the MCC doesn't do disaster, catastrophe, earthquake, tsunami type of relief. We're doing something which is slightly different. USAID does that. So we leave that to them, and we do what we're doing.
I guess my question is, do you foresee Bush being able to change that because there's more and you're the only government representative?
Right. So I get to be asked the question, right?
You're the only government representative.
Do I think, is the question, will MCC replace USAID in terms of that type of assistance?
No. What I'm
No.
asking is, do you foresee Bush being able to get those changes despite resistance from the agricultural businesses that want to see all the USAID money spent in this country? The subsidy, you know.
Well, I think efforts are being made with regards to subsidies, particularly in the biofuels area. So I think that's an initiative that the administration is carrying out. As you know, President Lula and President Bush just met in Sao Paulo as well as at Camp David last week. And so there is an initiative with regards to biofuels and subsidies that affect the American agricultural sector. So whether or not the president can carry out this initiative with the support of Congress is another matter. As you well know, there are strong interests in Congress that are against this type of thing.
Do you have any impact, or do you have negotiations with the World Trade Organization to encourage less subsidies to our farmers and more?
No. No. Yes?
Thank you. I wondered if your organisation, the Millennium Development Corporation, was working with Transparency International. It seemed as if there might be some interesting
We are,
parallels.
very much so. Transparency is one of our indicator assessors. These indicators that we have are not U.S. government indicators. I mentioned this matrix that we have of political, economic, and social indicators that we call ruling justly, investing in people, and economic freedom. And there is a broad spectrum of NGO communities, entities, and transparency is certainly one of them that we rely on tremendously, particularly in our ruling justly category, as you might well imagine, with regards to corruption, voice and accountability, civil rights, political liberties, that type of thing. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Steve West, the West Foundation. I wanted to ask Steve West at the West Foundation, Indianapolis. I'm trying to ask this about your corruption efforts. Do the funds, you're measuring the performance of the country, but do some of the funds you send go to individual projects in different districts? So often a district in an underdeveloped area of the world is not in the same position as the
Central government.
as the national government. If the corruption goes on in the district, but the national government's trying to control it, they'll still get a bad score.
Yeah.
And what can you do, if anything, to rule justly
Thank you.
between them?
Of our 16 indicators, countries must pass half of them in each category, except for the corruption indicator, which they must pass. It's our hard hurdle, our hard indicator. And in fact, most of our threshold programs are targeted at poor performance on the corruption indicator. The way we handle our money, so to speak, is not to disperse the entire amount of money. The money, our compacts range in size from our initial ones, which were small in nature, about $110 million to Madagascar, for example. Nicaragua, I mentioned, 175, to larger compacts that we're doing today in an effort to be more transformative with Ghana, which is $547 million. Mali is 461. By coincidence, El Salvador is also $461 million. And this money is dispersed only on a very measured, usually quarterly basis, to what's called an accountable entity. In the private sector, it'd be a joint venture company. That accountable entity is composed of, in the vast majority, let's say there are 10 people on the board of this accountable entity, is composed of country nationals, whether it be in Ghana or Madagascar, and to a very small extent by the MCC. We will usually have our resident country director and maybe someone else on that board, but the money is only given out to this accountable entity in a measured fashion based on their performance of their compact details. So, for example, to take a farm or a cooperative or an irrigation project, as that unfolds stage by stage, the money is dispersed stage by stage. not in advance. It doesn't sit in the accountable entity. It sits, for example, in the U.S. Treasury, gating interest before it's doled out, therefore hopefully lessening the possibility of corruption. And so it doesn't go directly to a national government or to a regional government, but rather to an accountable entity, a joint venture company, which will distribute this money over time, lessening the possibility of corruption. Yes, they do. Right. It is the way we measure it by country, not necessarily by the specific region that it's going to. It's the only way we can do it at this point. It certainly is in the region, in the specific region's benefit, to not be corrupt, because they know we monitor and evaluate it, and they know it if they slip on these indicators, which they mustn't just pass once, they must continue to pass every year during the life of the compact. So if there is corruption, if there is slippage, we'll stop the money, period, until the situation is corrected. Yes, last question, I think? Yes.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much. My name is Sergeant Skotanjan. I represent Armenian Fund International.
Excellent.
And I wanted to thank you and Millennium Challenge Corporation for including Armenia in the list. I've studied the program extensively, and believe me, it's going to change the lives of people.
Yes.
And I also wanted to let everybody know that Armenia Fund Internationally is already made a decision to also engage in a rural poverty eradication program in
Excellent.
Armenia with its 20 offices around the world. And we're working closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in order, because a lot of these projects, they're going to be in the same areas that Millennium Challenge account is working. And we're going to be concentrating mostly on the economic development, as well as putting schools, hospitals, etc. in those areas. So what we will be trying to do is sort of double the impact of the money that
Terrific.
is coming to Armenia from MCC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to hear about Armenia. It's one of our significant countries, and I'm very happy for the work that you're doing there. The Armenian community in the United States is particularly dynamic in looking at what the MCC is doing there and trying to find ways that they can augment, complement, parallel, work along with us to achieve a more dynamic synergy in getting these objectives done, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
What we're going to ask you to do now is just take a stretch as Mary Ellen Iskandarian makes her way up with her panel, because we're moving right on to her panel to stay on time. So here we go. So you got one big stretch, and then you will hear more about financial services for the poor. Thank you, John.